I want you to try and picture the greatest, most dominant athlete in a really brutal, bone-crushing sport. I mean, if you're imagining this physical giant, like someone built like a tank who could just bulldoze through defenders, you are definitely not alone in that.
Oh, absolutely. We naturally assume that to survive a sport defined by, high-speed physical impacts, having massive size is just a non-negotiable prerequisite.
Right, but what if I told you the undisputed greatest of all time in this particular collision sport stood just 5'11", and he weighed maybe 170 pounds soaking wet, consistently scored dead last in his team's strength tests, and get this, could barely bench press 140 pounds.
It completely shatters our expectations of what athletic dominance actually looks like. I mean, it doesn't compute.
It really doesn't. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring the life, the mind, and honestly, the really complex legacy of Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, you likely know the nickname The Great One, and you probably know he holds records that will just never be broken.
But our mission today is to go far beyond the back of the hockey card. We're going to unpack the actual mechanics of how a scrawny kid from Ontario fundamentally broke and then completely rebuilt the sport of hockey.
And we're also going to examine the intense psychological pressures of being a childhood prodigy. Plus, we'll look closely at the highly polarizing reality he's navigating right now off the ice.
Exactly. Which brings up the central mystery we kind of had to solve today for you guys listening. How does a guy who looks practically like a substitute teacher in hockey pads even survive the 1980s NHL, let alone completely dominate it?
Well, to understand the survival tactics, you really have to look at how his brain was wired from the very beginning. Long before he hit the professional leagues, his father, Walter Gretzky, built a backyard rink in Brantford, Ontario.
Right, they called it the Wally Coliseum, right?
Yeah, affectionately known as the Wally Coliseum. But Walter wasn't just sending his kid out to shoot pucks against a wall. The training methods were highly, highly unorthodox.
I mean, from what I read, it sounded like an obstacle course.
It pretty much was. Walter wouldn't set up standard traffic cones for skating drills. He would actually scatter bleach bottles and tin cans randomly across the ice.
Wait, just trash, like literal garbage on the ice.
Yeah, just random objects. So Wayne had to learn to navigate absolute chaos. He would practice flipping pucks over scattered hockey sticks and then catching them flat on the blade in full stride.
That is insane for a kid.
It really is. And throughout all of this, Walter drilled a single defining philosophy into his head. He'd say, skate where the puck's going, not where it's been.
And it obviously worked because by the time he was 6 years old, he was already playing organized hockey on a team of 10-year-olds, which is a huge age gap at that stage.
Oh, massive. And there's this really fascinating visual quirk that developed because of that. Since he was so small, the team sweaters for those 10-year-olds were just massive on him.
Right, like wearing a dress out there.
Basically, yeah. The fabric hung all the way down to his knees. So to keep it from tangling up his legs while he skated, he had to tuck the right side of the sweater into his hockey pants.
And the crazy thing is, he kept doing that, didn't he?
He did. He kept that exact same sweater tuck throughout his entire 20-season professional career. It was sort of a constant visual reminder to everyone watching that he was always undersized compared to his peers.
Wow. And yet, his production as a child was just terrifying. I mean, when he was 10 years old, he scored an absolutely staggering 378 goals in a single season.
It's hard to even wrap your head around that number.
Right. Those are numbers that look like a literal typo in the stat sheet. But there was a really dark side to that kind of childhood greatness, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was incredibly dark. If you think about the psychology of small-town minor hockey, he wasn't just good. His talent was so outsized that he was inadvertently making everyone else's children look foolish on the ice.
Oh, man, I can only imagine the parents.
The resentment from the parents of the other players was incredibly toxic. The records from that time actually show he faced vicious jealousy, even from the parents of his own teammates.
That is awful. And it peaked pretty early, right?
Yeah, the breaking point happened when he was just 14 years old. He was playing at the historic Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto on a day that was literally billed as Brantford Day.
Oh, no. Don't tell me.
Yeah. The hometown crowd actually booed him, a 14-year-old kid. The local environment became so totally abusive that his family had to mount a legal challenge against the Canadian Amateur Hockey Association rules.
Wait, they had to sue just to play hockey?
Essentially, yes. They fought in court just to win the right to move him to Toronto, simply to escape that unbearable pressure cooker in his hometown.
It's just heartbreaking to think about a kid facing that kind of hostility just for being exceptionally talented.
Yeah, it really is.
And that intense environment basically accelerated his timeline, right? Like pushing him into the professional ranks as a teenager just to get away from the amateur hockey politics.
Exactly. But his actual entry into the big leagues involved a literal mid-air gamble, and this remains one of the wildest business transactions in the history of sports.
I love this story. Set the scene for us.
Okay, so by 1978, the World Hockey Association, the WHA, was operating as this struggling rival league to the NHL. Crucially, though, the WHA had no minimum age rules.
Which was perfect for a 17-year-old Gretzky.
Right. So Nelson Scalabania, the owner of the Indianapolis Racers, signs a 17-year-old Gretzky to a personal services contract. But the Racers were an absolute financial disaster.
Yeah, they were bleeding something like $40,000 every single game, right?
Yeah, just burning money. So Scalabania realizes he has to liquidate his best asset to save the franchise. He puts Gretzky and 2 other players on a private plane, and the players literally do not know what city they are flying to.
Wait, they just took off with no destination?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while they're in the air, Scalabania gets on the phone. He calls the owner of the Winnipeg Jets, Michael Gobuty, and he offers to play a high-stakes game of backgammon.
A board game. You mean he tried to gamble a human being on backgammon?
Literally, yes. The proposed stakes were if the Jets owner wins the backgammon game, he gets Wayne Gretzky. If he loses, he has to give Scalabania a percentage share of the Winnipeg Jets franchise.
That is insane. Can you imagine the fate of the greatest hockey player of all time resting on a mid-air board game? What happened?
Well, Gobuty actually declined the bet. He wouldn't do it. So still in the air, Scalabania pivots. He calls Peter Pocklington, the owner of the Edmonton Oilers, and outright sells Gretzky for $700,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The plane finally gets a destination, lands in Edmonton, and the entire trajectory of the sport changes forever.
Just incredible. And shortly after that, the WHA folds, and 4 of its teams merge into the NHL, including those Edmonton Oilers. So Gretzky officially arrives on the biggest stage.
But even then, the critics were circling. They looked at this scrawny teenager and said, he's too small, he's too slow, the NHL defenders are going to eat him alive.
And he proved them wrong immediately, didn't he?
Oh, he silenced them instantly. In his rookie year, he ties for the league lead in scoring and wins the most valuable player award. And then he just kind of shatters the mathematical boundaries of the sport.
Yeah, those second and third seasons are legendary.
Yeah, completely. He breaks Bobby Orr's all-time assist record. He breaks Phil Esposito's points record. And then he achieves a milestone that hockey historians genuinely considered physically impossible: 50 goals in 39 games.
Because the legendary benchmark before that was 50 goals in 50 games, right?
Basically.
I don't get how a 140-pound guy does that. The math doesn't make any sense.
Well, Gretzky himself actually explained the geometry of it by comparing his style to how Larry Bird played basketball.
Okay, how so?
For Larry Bird, the most physically taxing part of the game was simply navigating screens to get open. The actual jump shot was the easy part for him. Gretzky viewed an ice rink the exact same way.
Like just getting to the spot was the work.
Right. He treated the ice like a piece of, quote, frozen real estate. His philosophy was that the puck moves faster than any human can possibly skate, so you don't carry it through traffic.
And just let it do the work.
Exactly. You give it up, you navigate to open ice, and you let the puck find you again.
Okay, I hear that basketball comparison, but a basketball court is static. A hockey rink is filled with 5 massive defenders moving at 25 miles an hour, trying to actively hit you.
That's a very fair point.
Which brings us to this idea of his mind. People always claimed he had, eyes in the back of his head. Let me push back on that for a second, because I feel like I've heard that cliche applied to 100 different athletes. What did that actually mean in practice? Was he just guessing?
It wasn't guesswork at all, and it certainly wasn't some kind of psychic ability. The veteran Canadian journalist Peter Gonzowski spent a lot of time observing him and noted that Gretzky seemed to be able to slow down time.
Slow down time? How?
He had this unhurried grace where he could insert an extra, almost microscopic beat into his actions, holding the puck for just 1 instant longer than a defender expected.
Oh, so throwing off their timing.
Exactly. Mechanically, what he was doing was memorizing the shifting patterns of players on the ice the way you or I might memorize a phone number.
So when a play is breaking down, he's not just reacting in a panic to the chaos. He's recognizing a pre-recorded sequence in his brain.
Precisely. If the opposing left defenseman pinched in at a certain angle, Gretzky's brain automatically knew exactly where the resulting open space would be on the other side of the ice.
Wow.
And this cognitive mapping totally broke the traditional Canadian hockey strategy.
Because the old strategy was basically just hero ball, right? Like, give it to the fastest guy.
Yeah, that was the traditional method. Give the puck to your biggest, fastest star player and let him make a heroic dash through the neutral zone. But Gretzky physically couldn't bowl through defenders.
Right. At 170 pounds, that's not happening.
So instead, he adopted a team-based transition game that was heavily influenced by European and Soviet styles of play. He used his 4 teammates to create complex distractions, moving the puck constantly.
Making them defend all 5 guys.
Yes. He forced opponents to defend against a 5-man unit, rather than isolating on one star.
Hall of Fame goalie Ken Dryden actually noted that Gretzky made his teammates full partners out there. If they didn't elevate their cognitive game to his level, they'd just be left looking foolish.
Okay, so if he's forcing opponents to defend all 5 guys, that sounds brilliant for offensive production. But it still doesn't change the defensive reality of the 1980s NHL. Guys like Dave the Hammer Schultz were actively looking to end careers. How did he physically survive those enforcers?
Well, he relied on 2 really distinct survival mechanisms. First was the obvious deterrent bodyguards.
Ah, right.
Yeah, the Edmonton Oilers deliberately employed terrifying enforcers like Dave Semenko and Marty McSorley. The unwritten rule was super clear. If you took a cheap shot at Gretzky, you had to answer to them, and it wouldn't be pretty.
Sure, but bodyguards can't be on the ice for every single shift, right? What was the second mechanism?
The second mechanism is deeply biomechanical, and it traces back to his childhood summers playing box lacrosse. Wait, box lacrosse? How does playing a summer sport on indoor turf help him avoid getting crushed on an ice rink?
Because box lacrosse is played inside the really tight confines of an emptied-out hockey arena. The quarters are incredibly claustrophobic, and violent cross-checking is just a standard legal part of the game.
Oh, so you can't just skate away from it.
Exactly. You don't have the vast open ice to escape contact. So Gretzky had to learn the precise physical biomechanics of absorbing a hit and immediately slipping off the contact.
That makes a lot of sense.
Hall of Fame defenseman Dennis Potvin described the frustration perfectly. He said trying to line up a body check on Gretzky was like wrapping your arms around fog.
I love that imagery. Wrapping your arms around fog.
You'd brace for the impact, and he would just seamlessly roll his shoulders and vanish.
And the historical accounts say that if a player did manage to take a run at him, Gretzky wouldn't drop his gloves and fight. His revenge was entirely psychological. He would just embarrass the guy by dropping 6 points on his team that night.
Yeah, his mastery of open ice geometry was so absolute that the NHL literally had to rewrite its rulebook because of him.
You're talking about the Gretzky rule.
Hmm?
Explain how that worked tactically.
So in 1985, the league introduced coincidental offsetting penalties, meaning if 2 players from opposing teams committed a penalty at the exact same time, they both went to the penalty box and the teams played 4-on-4 instead of the usual 5-on-5.
Which, I mean, that seems entirely fair on paper.
On paper, yes. But for the Edmonton Oilers, removing 2 human bodies from the ice surface created so much extra frozen real estate that it broke the defensive formations entirely.
Oh, because Gretzky had more room to operate.
Exactly. His transition style used that extra space to score almost at will. The rule essentially operated as a cheat code for Edmonton. The league eventually had to reverse the rule years later because the Oilers were simply too lethal with that much open ice.
That is wild. So he uses this unparalleled vision to build this unstoppable dynasty in Edmonton. They're winning Stanley Cups, setting records that, like we said, look like typos.
Untouchable numbers.
But professional sports dynasties are highly expensive businesses. And the financial reality of the Oilers leads to a day that genuinely traumatized Canada, August 9th, 1988.
Yeah? The trade.
Just 2 hours after winning his 4th Stanley Cup with Edmonton, Gretzky gets a phone call from his dad, revealing that he's being shopped around to other teams. Peter Pocklington, the Oilers owner, was heavily leveraged in his other businesses and desperately needed a cash infusion. So Gretzky is traded to the Los Angeles Kings.
And the fallout from that was seismic. I mean, Canadian politicians literally stood up in the House of Commons and demanded the federal government step in to block the trade.
I read that Pocklington was burned in effigy outside the arena in Edmonton.
He was. It was viewed as a profound national betrayal.
But you know, the way the fans directed their anger is really telling. When Gretzky finally returned to Edmonton to play against the Oilers, but this time in a Kings uniform, you might expect a really hostile crowd.
Yeah, you would think so.
Instead, he steps onto the ice, and a sold-out building gives him a booming 4-minute-long standing ovation. They cheered his first shift, they cheered his assists, they even cheered when an Edmonton player checked him into the boards.
It was this massive collective catharsis. But if we zoom out to the macro level, that trade completely altered the geographic business model of the NHL.
How so?
Well, Gretzky, moving to Los Angeles, suddenly popularized hockey in California, which was a place entirely disconnected from traditional ice sports. His star power proved that the sport could actually thrive in warm-weather American markets.
Oh, so that paved the way for the Sun Belt expansion.
Directly, yes.
We literally redrew the map of the NHL in America.
Yeah.
But it's so fascinating that for a guy who exerted total control over the North American professional leagues, his experiences wearing the Canadian flag internationally were incredibly volatile.
Yeah, the international stage was a complete roller coaster for him. The absolute peak of his career, by his own admission, actually, was the 1987 Canada Cup.
Right, when he played on a line with Mario Lemieux.
Exactly. In the deciding game against a highly favored Soviet team, Gretzky perfectly executes a fake shot, freezes the defender, and threads a pass to Lemieux for the tournament-winning goal. It remains one of the most iconic tactical plays in hockey history.
Just over a decade later, that international experience turned super bitter. Fast forward to the 1998 Winter Olympics in Nagano. This is the first time NHL professionals are allowed to compete in the Olympics.
A huge deal.
A very huge deal. But Gretzky is surprisingly passed over for the team captaincy. And then in a really tense semifinal against the Czech Republic, the game goes to a shootout. And coach Mark Crawford controversially leaves Gretzky sitting on the bench.
Yeah, he doesn't select the greatest scorer in history to take a shot. And Canada loses.
It was a devastating blow to his international legacy.
Mm.
But he found a very different kind of redemption 4 years later, right?
Yeah.
At the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City.
He did. He wasn't playing this time. He was serving as the executive director of the Canadian men's team.
Right.
The team started the tournament playing terribly, and the media scrutiny was just suffocating.
Right.
So the traditionally polite, diplomatic Wayne Gretzky steps in front of the microphones and unleashes a highly emotional tirade.
Yeah, he accused the media and fans of spreading American propaganda. He was claiming that everyone in the world was taking joy in seeing Canada fail. It was so out of character for him.
It was completely uncharacteristic, but tactically, it was a total masterstroke. By creating a massive media controversy, he took all the suffocating pressure off his players and placed it squarely onto his own shoulders.
Like a distraction.
Exactly. It galvanized the locker room with this us against the world mentality, and Canada actually went on to win gold, which was their first in 50 years.
Incredible. So he officially retires as a player in 1999. He holds 61 NHL records. His number 99 is retired across the entire league. But stepping off the ice introduces a totally different kind of pressure.
Oh, definitely.
The legacy of the Great One in his post-retirement life has proven to be incredibly complex.
It's a classic struggle for a legendary athlete, you know? You spend your whole life mastering one domain and then try to replicate that dominance in other fields where the rules aren't quite as clear.
Yeah, like his coaching stint.
Right. He tried his hand at coaching the Phoenix Coyotes, but that venture ultimately ended in the team filing for bankruptcy and his resignation. He also launched numerous businesses, from restaurants to his own winery and distillery.
But the public perception really started to fracture around his cultural and political choices. Let's look at the controversies surrounding the Order of Canada. For context, this is one of the country's highest civilian honors.
Right. So in 2009, Gretzky was promoted to a Companion of the Order of Canada, which is the highest possible rank. But he has repeatedly failed to actually attend his investiture ceremonies in Ottawa to formally receive the honor.
And people notice that.
Oh, absolutely. Honors experts have publicly criticized this absence. They point out that for most recipients, this ceremony is the defining highlight of their lives. Skipping it is viewed by some as an insult to the institution and to the other recipients who do show up.
Then there are his political alignments. And I want to be crystal clear to you listening. We are strictly examining the historical record here to understand how his public life has evolved. We aren't taking sides or validating any specific viewpoint.
Right. The historical record simply shows that Gretzky has consistently aligned himself with conservative politicians in Canada and Republicans in the United States.
Okay, what does the timeline on that look like?
Well, in 2003, he publicly praised U.S. President George W. Bush. During the 2015 Canadian federal election, he endorsed Prime Minister Stephen Harper and actually appeared at a campaign rally for him.
Which drew criticism because he wasn't living in Canada at the time, right?
Oh, exactly. He was not a Canadian resident. And more recently, in 2024, he attended Donald Trump's presidential election victory party, where Trump publicly suggested that Gretzky should be the Prime Minister or Governor of Canada.
Which brings us to kind of the boiling point of this tension, occurring at the 2025 Four Nations Face-Off tournament. Gretzky was named the honorary captain for Team Canada, but the reception he got was a universe away from that 4-minute standing ovation he once received in Edmonton.
Yeah, the reality on the ground was stark. When he appeared, he faced a chorus of boos from the crowd. Furthermore, unlike the American honorary captain who proudly wore a Team USA jersey, Gretzky chose not to wear a Team Canada jersey.
He was also seen giving a thumbs up to the American team as he came onto the ice, right?
Yeah.
Offering no similar gesture to the Canadian squad.
That's correct. And the fallout from fans was immediate. Petitions began circulating online demanding that the city of Edmonton actually strip his name from Wayne Gretzky Drive.
That is a massive shift in public sentiment.
If we look at the psychology of this shift, it's profound. Think about his entire life up to this point. Since he was 6 years old, he existed in a highly protected bubble where his mechanical actions on the ice dictated 100% of his public approval.
Right.
But in the political and cultural sphere, you can't just outskate criticism. Endorsing a controversial politician isn't a hockey play. It immediately alienates a massive portion of your audience, introducing a dynamic of public rejection that he had never truly faced without a stick in his hands.
It really forces us to re-examine the impossible standards we demand of our childhood heroes. But as we wrap up this deep dive, we have to anchor ourselves back to the ice. Because regardless of the messy realities off the rink, the sheer scale of his athletic dominance is permanent.
Oh, absolutely. The numbers remain untouched and likely untouchable. 894 career goals, 1,963 assists, 2,857 total points.
And I want to remind you of my absolute favorite mind-bending stat. Wayne Gretzky has more assists than any other player in NHL history has total points.
It's just staggering.
It really is.
Yeah.
Even if you magically erased every single goal he ever scored, he would still be the all-time points leader just from his assists alone.
It's the ultimate testament to that team-first, transition-style geometry we analyzed earlier. He truly was the smartest player to ever lace up skates.
He really was. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We spent this entire deep dive marveling at how his mind worked. From the time he was a kid in an oversized sweater dodging bleach bottles, to his reign as a global superstar, his entire life was defined by an almost supernatural ability to see clean, predictable patterns on the ice that no one else could see.
Right.
He knew exactly where the puck was going before it got there. But how jarring must it be to step off that frozen real estate, take off the skates, and try to navigate the unpredictable, highly critical, and deeply unforgiving patterns of the real world. When the rules of public life aren't as clear-cut as a 4-on-4 penalty, does the title of the Great One become as much of a heavy burden as it is an honor?
Yeah, the real world just doesn't have the same predictable geometry as the Wally Coliseum.
It sure doesn't. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the complex, incredible life of Wayne Gretzky. We'll see you next time.